UK is legally required to be impartial or something like that. Now, if you have ever seen any BBC report ever about Israel and the wars that its neighbors start against it, you know that that is not the case, but they have to appear at least to be impartial, and part of that appearance is BBC Verify. BBC Verify is the people who go through, whatever it is that the BBC is doing and tell you why it's A-OK or why, oopsie, they made a mistake somewhere. Now, when it comes to Israel, BBC Verify can actually go through a story that was on the BBC that there is that where they claim that 31 people were killed, where there is zero evidence that a single person was shot by the people that they are saying got shot, and no pretense of getting this information from anywhere other than Hamas. Yeah, this is what British people are forced to pay for. I'm sure some are super excited to pay for it. Some of us in this country, not so much. Welcome to the reality show. I'm joined by Jonathan and Alex. Alex, you are formerly of this country and now of the country that the BBC would like to see you know, be a thing of the past. Your initial thoughts before we go into this story.
First off, I spent 16 years there as a child. My family were immigrants to Scotland. But you know what this really reminds me of? It really reminds me of the Soviet propaganda that used to say that the IDF were taking Palestinian organs. It was a huge conspiracy back in the day, and it was disproved multiple times. And it didn't really matter how much evidence there was that refuted these ludicrous claims. It was sort of like, okay, maybe you guys didn't do it, but you want to, don't you? It is kind of, there's this very sort of, like, as conspiratorial undertone to this. It's like, yeah, well, maybe they didn't do it this time, but they want to. I mean, that's all they want to do. And who cares if we're wrong? We're against Israel. Don't blame us. It's just it's disgusting. But I think that it's better. The more outrageous they become, the more discredited they become, the better I think it is for everybody. I think we can all agree.
In a sense, yes, but we will discuss it. Thank you, PC, for the super chat. PC says, Bias Broadcasting Corporation. Thank you for keeping it family friendly. Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's almost two issues going on here, right? There's the fact that Razi and other UK residents are forced to subsidize a media enterprise, and that media enterprise's reprehensible view on the whole situation writ large, the whole Hamas Israel situation writ large. I think, for me, Razi, I would be particularly offended, and we have it on a very much smaller scale here with NPR and PBS. But the fact that there's government-funded programming, what is that programming going to say? Whose side, in effect, is going to take? That's offensive on its face, and you see it played out over and over again in absolutely not even just one-sided reporting from the BBC, false reporting from the BBC, to which no one seems in any great hurry to correct.
Well, they did want to correct, but an interesting kind of correction. Let's go through this correction. So the title of this BBC Verify article: Israeli army admits to Gaza strike after BBC Verify investigation. Okay, let's pause there. Because when I saw this, my first thought was, did somebody in the IDF say, you know what, actually, we killed those 31? That's the first thing that came to mind. Like, because what are they talking about? What has been challenged? What news story by the BBC has been challenged recently? And it is the massacre story. So that's I don't know if either of you have something to say about that, or you want me to read the rest of the article. But yeah, any thoughts just on that headline? Because it as Ogilvy says, five times as many people read the headline as the rest of the story. So It's true for ads, probably true for news as well.
Yeah, I mean, so much of the reporting in this entire conflict is those headlines, Razi. Israel genocide, Israel poor Palestinians. Wealthy belligerent Israel again, just targeting innocent civilians, innocent Palestinians. And Dr. Brook made the comment on his show. I thought was pretty appropriate. The very notion that Israel would set up aid centers only to then have sitting civilian targets sent to gun down at will is so kind of ridiculous on its face, especially since they have the firepower to completely level the entire country, the entire region at any time they want. So, on its face, there's a level of absurdity, this claim of, Israelis whim massacre, but BBC seems to run with it. And so do so many other media channels around the world.
Yeah, and by the way, the only thing that would make it not ridiculous is if you know Palestinian society and you can imagine soldiers having to defend themselves from civilians. So, which was not the case in this case, but it has been in the past. Alex.
I just love, I mean, it really doesn't matter how ridiculous their reporting is. I mean, even if you take a look at the article, you have two men, neither of them are injured. One of them is carrying the other one like lovers, like they're lovers, doing a little kind of beach pose, right? It's just even that you don't look at it and you don't go, that is a little weird, isn't it? Why is this, man picking up this other man and looking very stressed out when they're not injured? You can see there's no injuries on them. Well, it doesn't matter. It really reminds me of the New York Times. They had a journalist in the 1930s called Walter Duranty, and he was the Moscow correspondent who did not. He won the Pulitzer. He won a Pulitzer Prize, and he for years denied the existence of the Holodomor. He denied the existence of famines. He said, I think his famous quote was, the Soviets are hungry, but they're not starving. It was kind of like, yeah, well, it kind of reminds me of this. It's sort of like in the sick, twisted mind of somebody like Walter Duranty and the people who enabled him. Okay, they were sort of like, yeah, okay, like this is a noble cause. So yeah, we have to lie a little, we have to omit a little, but the cause is good. Okay, like they were believing in the Soviet propaganda and they wanted to basically misinform the public about what was going on. It's exactly the same here. I can just imagine the journalists being like, I mean, this is a good cause. Okay, so we're not doing exactly what we would normally do, but come on, we had to do something. I mean, I've heard a rumor that the Israeli soldiers are making matzah out of the blood of the Palestinian children. I mean, we have to report this, don't we? It's no end to the ludicrousness.
Yeah, but there is a start to the ludicrousness, and we're gonna read it. Thank you, Bronx guy, Gun Hill Road, for the super chat. Let's get into this article. The Israeli military has admitted to BBC Verify that it conducted a previously unacknowledged strike on the al-Mawasi area of southern Gaza, which reportedly killed at least one Palestinian and injured 30 others. The strike took place on Sunday, hours after 31 Palestinians were killed in an incident near a new aid distribution center in the city of Rafah, according to the Hamas-run Civil Defense Agency. Yeah, I don't know how many people make it past the headline, but that paragraph-long sentence, many people would not make it to the end of, or would just skip the Hamas run, or of course they are supporters of Hamas. I mean, you are saying that this is fact, and then you are saying this is the reliable source from which we got it.
I mean, what's the only thing is, why is not any Hamas source completely discredited? I mean, a year ago we were talking on this channel about how Hamas swore, oh, there's no military sites beneath these hospitals or these schools. No. But yet, they're pulling hostages out of there. They're pulling weapons out of there. So like, consider the source. Anything these guys say, I think is complete bunk. And even the so-called footage, the hard evidence. I mean, there was a piece of tape going around the internet, going around social media in recent days that supposedly showed some of this massacre. Turns out it wasn't from this time frame. It was a totally separate incident from years prior. So, consider the source when the Hamas agency tells you anything. And also consider the fact that all of this is due to a war that they started. And that's what also I find frustrating about the coverage, Razi. It's presented as if, well, Israel's just going about its business and attacking poor innocent Palestinians and the innocent Hamas without any context of why they're at war in the first place.
Yeah. Alex.
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, listen, for somebody like me who has seen a lot of like Palestinian propaganda and manufactured scenarios, you can see classic. They mention it showed bloody bodies surrounded by dust. The dust. I mean, the dust is really the thing that is like the quintessential. They have people who are on the ground there who are working for Al Jazeera and they're directors. They direct the whole scene. And one of their major props is dust. It's dust. You ever see that they always have the dust on their face? I have to say, I've seen a lot of pigoas, like terrorist attacks. No one has dust on their face. It's carnage, broken limbs, pieces of flying everywhere. If you get a gunshot wound, your head could blow off. I mean, it's really, there's unambiguous doubt as to what you're looking at. Here you see a couple of people with, dust covering their faces, carrying each other with the ambulance. The ambulance is the perfect one. The ambulance is the quintessential prop, right? It's absolutely I mean, I mean, later on, they actually they don't think to themselves, okay, hang on a minute. Here you have the Israelis who are wanting to distribute aid to the population. And obviously we don't agree with that, but they are doing it. And the raison d'etre of this is a military achievement, if you want, if you will, because it's to break Hamas's ability to make more money and also to control the population. So they're on their kind of their last legs, okay, as a military and governmental entity. So it's obvious that they're coming out with all of these ridiculous, because they want them to retreat. They want them to stop doing this. You don't think that in your mind that this is an obvious military achievement for Hamas, to say, oh, there's a massacre. Oh, you got to get we'll distribute the aid. Get the UN back in here. We can't trust them. They're just massacring us. And so they go to claim this nonsense. And then later on, they say, no, actually, it was a warning shot. Oh, a warning shot. Okay, because they want to fire warning shots to get them to deter them from looting. Okay, it's like it's so lazy, it's so disgusting, it's so vindictive, it's so, I think, evil. They should be ashamed.
Well, and I'll just say that the fact that it's the BBC, I mean, InfoWars does a lot of programming that I think is absolute. Well, all of it, I shouldn't say a lot of it. All of it is horseshit. And my response is not to pay for it, not to watch it, and not to, frequent anyone who advertises on it. Razi, you don't have that luxury. Whatever percentage of your earnings goes towards funding these absolutely reprehensible ideas, posturing as journalism. I tell you, I mean, I always feel like the post office here in the States would be a great thing to privatize. Is there ever any talk in the UK about privatizing the BBC, selling it off, and letting it actually be,
it's a cult.
There is some talk about the tax, the BBC, the TV license. But yeah, that's the thing. It's not a percentage of your income. It's a flat rate that you have to pay every year, and if not, they threaten to come to your home, and they do. So yeah, and if you basically the rule is if you watch any live television, you have to pay it. So that is the rule in this country, and it's Yeah, it's not going away anytime soon. It's definitely not going away under Labor. But remember, we have Labor for just under a year in power, and before that, we had the Conservatives in power for 14 years, who were governing to the left of the previous Labor government. So, long story short, it's not going anywhere.
And I'll just say Apollo Zeus, who is a YouTube member. And look, we bring you, I'll just say, ARCUK brings you a material inspired by Ayn Rand's objectivists, experts like Alex, Razi, and so many others, 7 days a week. And we only do it through people like Apollo Zeus and Zara Walden and Bonnie Bertrand, who are members on our YouTube channel. Become a member. It's 5 or 10, I think it's £5 a month. It's nothing. And it's really important that you support these ideas. We're out there, we're advocating in the culture for reason, for Ayn Rand. Apollo Zeus said it's 180 pounds a year. So that's like over $200, well over $200 a year,
like
towards
250.
programming that is reprehensible, that you don't agree with, that you don't want to support, but you're forced to at the point of a barrel of a gun.
Yeah, that's what it is. But look, we don't just pay for the programming, we also pay for BBC Verified. So let's continue to see what they have to say.
Sorry, I just want to say, Jonathan, I would much rather pay for InfoWars. I would much rather give them my money than have the BBC. Really, I would much rather do it. If there was a choice,
it's probably more entertaining.
I would much rather.
Oh yeah, for entertainment purposes. Yeah, I mean, how
No
about
doubt.
none of the above?
No doubt. Yeah,
How
well,
about-
I'm simply saying that if there's no contest in my mind if it was choose one or the other.
Well, there is the idea, I don't know to what extent it's implemented in America, of school vouchers, where you, instead of paying taxes, you pay for a private school. Maybe we can have, as a step away from the TV license, that instead of paying your TV license, you can pay for Ayn Rand Center UK membership.
Yeah.
Thank you, Apollo Zeus, for gifting an Ayn Rand Center UK membership. And Shauna, welcome. Shauna received that membership. Okay, let's get what we paid for from the BBC. While reviewing footage, this is more from BBC Verify. While reviewing footage purporting to show the incident near the aid distribution center, BBC Verify identified a separate strike in the nearby city of Khan Yunis. The blast was not previously announced by the Israeli Defense Forces, which regularly publishes operational updates online. It was only when approached by BBC Verify that the IDF admitted it had carried out an artillery strike and said the incident was the result of, quote, technical and operational errors. They said troops had fired towards a, quote, target, but the artillery had, quote, deviated and, quote, wrongfully hit the Mawasi area, a coastal strip of Khan Yunis. The IDF did not provide evidence for these assertions. Interesting sentence. The IDF did not provide evidence for these assertions. No similar sentence about Hamas's report of the massacre. But also, in war, if BBC is questioning whether this was this other incident was an accident or not, first of all, in war, accidents happen, and many Israeli soldiers, as well as hostages, have been killed. A few hostages have been killed in such accidents. They happen. As everything that happens in war, is the responsibility of the people who started the war. And remember, the people who started this war have a standing offer to end it whenever they want and refuse to. This is a war the Palestinians want and are not trying in any way to end.
Yeah, I mean, implicit in all of the BBC, Razi, and so much of the media's reporting is the idea that Israel is responsible for avoiding civilian casualties, is responsible for all this aid. I mean, that's a must, right? That's a given, and responsible for accepting any ceasefire at any opportunity. So it's like it's inherent in the culture's perspective of Israel is this notion that they can't actually win the war. They shouldn't even be fighting it. They should be, I don't know, turning the other cheek. But, we talked about it last week. For me, just the very idea that they set up an aid station itself is an affront to the IDF soldiers who have put themselves on the line to try to bring this war to the end. And as you said, the Palestinians could end this war within the hour. Raise the white flag, surrender, bring home the hostages. They don't want it. And that's why it continues.
Alex.
Yeah, I mean, for me, really, it just it really reminds me of like KGB active measures. I see the remnants of the the kind of the Soviet anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic propaganda inside of the BBC. The anti-imperialist ideology, this kind of gobbledygook about the Palestinians being the universal victim. And I think back to, of course, the the UN resolution in 1979 that declared Zionism a form of racism. And you have like you literally have the Soviet era propaganda would say Zionist aggression. Well, BBC will just say Israeli bombardment. The Soviet era would have said, popular resistance. And the BBC will just say militants fire rockets. Um, and it's told through this lens of these absolutely like I like they're actually run by people who these NGOs that inform the opinions of the BBC. They were, formed by anti-Western communists. And I think that I hear it so much, and I didn't particularly think prior to 2023 that I would see it to such a degree in the modern era. I thought that, yes, of course, if you go to the Arab world, indeed, you will see a lot of, anti-Semitic conspiracies based around the elders of Zion, etc. We know that. But in the BBC, they're kind of they're like it's Western guilt and it's ideological inertia and of maybe a touch of anti-Semitism, and it all comes together, and then you see the results. This is the results. Okay. This is the modern day version of those caricatures that you used to have of the big Jew with his, big nose and his Star of David, and he's eating a baby, and the blood is, coming out of his mouth, and he's got a swastika. This is the modern day version of this. It's blood libel. It's suggesting that Israeli soldiers, kill for sports. That an innate there's an innate need, okay? Like, oh, they've lured the conspiratorial, they've lured the Palestinians here to pretend to give them aid, to shoot them. I
Right.
mean, it is so Soviet, so Soviet.
I mean, the irony is that we know from the UNRWA footage of these schools that, in fact, that's what happens in so many Palestinian schools, whereas they teach young kids, from an early age, giving them a little toy gun, then an actual gun, down the Jews with the Jews, kill the Jews from the river to the sea. I mean, that's the indoctrination that happens in Palestine, in Gaza. Yet it's in Israel where they're teaching them to be scientists, engineers, coders, and grow up to become part of the real modern world, shaping the real modern world.
Yeah, by the way, those the Guardian had was it when Ariel Sharon was prime minister, or was it Netanyahu? A very like a full on like I think it was Sharon eating a Palestinian baby and saying something like, "What, you've never seen a politician kiss a baby?" So yeah, they there's the
I just love
pretense that that this is about Israel's policy or about I mean, look, when people say Zionism, it's already not about Israel's policy. It's about the existence of a Jewish state. And yeah, that is already anti-Semitism. But okay, let's go to this
No, it's not
article.
anti-Semitism, Razi, because remember, they've said anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. So that makes it so, Razi. That's the rules. Okay,
Well,
got with the program.
yeah. Well, okay, let's go back to the program that the BBC is putting on. The article continues. The IDF rarely acknowledges such, quote, errors. A BBC Verify analysis of statements of the IDF's official Telegram account could only find 4 previous instances of it admitting to making a, quote, mistake, quote, technical, or, quote, operational error relating to the war in Gaza since it began in October 2023. The footage we reviewed from the Khan Yunis blast first began to emerge late on Sunday evening. It showed bloodied bodies surrounded by dust clouds in an area where Palestinians were living in tents. Women and children, of course, could be seen running and screaming as they watched injured people carried away. The Israeli strike hit an area where a number of displaced Palestinians had been sheltering. The UN has estimated that 90% of the Strip's population of 2.1 million people have been forced to flee their homes. So much of this is various ways of saying, here's a source of information when the source of information is Hamas. So the source of information on how many Palestinians are in Gaza is Hamas. The source of how many are displaced, Hamas. How many killed, Hamas. Every time you hear a journalist from Gaza, that is Hamas. But there are enough people repeating it that you can say we're reporting not what Hamas said, we're reporting what the UN or Amnesty International or one of these bodies is saying, when it is in fact a different person or organization repeating what the terrorist organization that started this war and refuses to end it is putting out there.
Yeah, I mean, on some level, that's why it's not true. It's like if 90% of the population is so inconvenienced and so been put off so terribly, does this war continue? It continues with largely the sanction of the Palestinian people. And I think the Western publications would like to have you believe that it's a couple bad actors. Hamas is just a couple of guys, and the poor Palestinians, they have to put up with Hamas as well. I mean, they are enabled by the Palestinian people, and this war can end at any time. I mean, I would never purport to speak for Israel, but my sense is young Israelis would much rather get back to building, creating, being part of companies, being part of families, being part of lives, rather than destroying anything. So the onus is on Hamas to end the war that they started and that the Palestinian people to this day support.
Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I even think that it's kind of crazy that you would have such a thing as BBC Verify, because what are you doing? You're saying like, oh, our reporter who's supposed to be checking the truth, they either did or they didn't. We have to verify our story. Well, if you have to verify your story to get your facts straight, to get your ducks in a row, I think that says something about your, editorial integrity. Also, who's running BBC Verify? Yeah, I feel as
Jeremy
well.
Bowen?
Oh, there you go.
No,
There you go.
no,
I
that was
mean,
I
it,
doubt that.
it's like, okay, so you always know when you're dealing with the BBC because they never use the word terrorist. They never they always have to be you know utterly emphasizing the suffering, and to be drawing on those images to say it is such a shield. It is to say, okay, yeah, maybe they started a little war. Maybe they did a little cross-border raid, but holy shit, look at them. They're suffering. They're suffering. They're hungry. That's all we need to know. No more questions have to be asked about this. And how dare you defend yourself? You need to just really, remember what's happening here. Okay, so what? They did a little cross-border raid. They were a bit naughty. They took a couple of people, right? Just get over it already. What do you expect? They're suffering savages. It's just I there's I really I never actually can read a BBC story and actually understand what they're trying to say. What is the news story here? The news story is something or other happened, blah blah blah, and there's suffering of the Palestinians who's 55,000 have died. What's the news story here? The sun rose in Israel yesterday and it set, and there's Palestinian suffering. It's just I think I really believe that especially the American people, I believe the American people are tremendously fair when they're evaluating stories. I have a lot of, faith in the American. I mean, I've seen it time and time again that the American people are able to even to receive an inordinate amount of disinformation and to weed through it. Okay, so I do have faith. I do have I do believe that this is because this is such an outrageous web of lies, that rationality, reason, and truth, all reason, rationality, and truth has to do is just to exist. Okay, and just to continue to talk about it, because this is a house of cards. It really is. It's just barely holding on.
Well, and Alex, I'll tally up or add on to what you said. You identified, some of those BBC stories, and it's like they seem to specialize in a picture of some kind of rubble and destruction, and then it's Israel's bombing, Israel's this. So, and Dr. Peikoff has a wonderful article that maybe we can get put in the chat. Dr. Leonard Peikoff, he is Ayn Rand's intellectual heir. He gave a speech, I believe it was a Fort Hall Forum years ago, entitled "A Picture Is Not an Argument." So that seems to be so much of what Hamas and right along with the New York Times and so many others specialize in. They show you some kind of a terrible picture, a child being held by a parent, and say Israel's attacks continue. And for most people, that's QED. Their argument is settled. So a picture is not an argument, as Dr. Peikoff would say, and to take the time to learn not only the history, but the context in which all of these claims and arguments are being made.
Yeah, I just want to say this because I'm really effing tired of them using their children in this way. It is so disgusting. It is so vile. It is so deeply damaging. If you go, for example, to Twitter and you see, Gaza, I think it's Gaza Wood, is one of the great ones where they show you them actually creating this nonsense propaganda. You see them taking the children and 3 years old. I can't even. It hurts me even to think about it. And trying to make them cry. It's a little bit like you would see in India, decades ago, that they would injure children because it would bring them more donations, okay, from begging. This is absolutely the same as that, and nobody asks any questions. Nobody really. No, it's nothing. We don't need to see this. It's not child abuse, of course not. Even when it's proven that the BBC engaged in child abuse, okay? That documentary that they created with that child walking through the various different hospitals, having to basically having to produce this, that was child abuse. I really don't see it as anything besides that.
You mean the Hamas documentary, the one that they took
Yes.
down? Yeah.
The one where the child was the star. A child. I mean, they should be ashamed, really ashamed.
Well,
I hope that child sues the BBC.
They'd have to have some morals to be ashamed. I don't think they have those. But when you said I don't understand why BBC Verify has to exist, for some reason, the first thing that came to my mind is my all-time favorite show of shows that are on news channels, which is Fox News Red Eye, which was in the middle of the night. Jonathan Hoenig was on it a couple of times, and Red Eye had part of the show was it was a panel show. It was a kind of show you'd expect to be kind of friendly to the people who are watching at 3 a.m. But they had this guy who was like the ombudsman who would come in. He would do a halftime report, and then at the end he would basically fact check people, and it was entertaining. But it was much more, much more fact check, like proper fact checking than anything I've seen from the BBC. Remember, even the 14,000 babies story, 14,000 babies are going to die in the next 48 hours. Their retraction was a milder retraction than what I forget his name used to do on Red Eye. Jonathan.
Well, I'm curious. I don't know. Maybe some of our super chatters have a sense of this, of the BBC's influence. I cannot say that I hear it quoted much here in the States. I suppose it's seen as reputable in the sense that it's British, and I feel like in the States, British things have a sense of they're seen as reputable. But how influential is the BBC? Globally these days. I mean, does it dominate in the UK? Because it certainly doesn't dominate the global conversation.
I think it's very influential. In the UK, it's very influential, and it's not even, I'm not sure who's worse in the UK, if it's BBC or Channel 4, and I'm not even talking about the newspapers, some of which are almost borderline, well, not borderline. They are repeating Hamas propaganda as we mentioned. But Alex, thoughts on that before we continue with the article?
I mean, let's just hear what the BBC have to say. I mean, I'm sure it's going to be I'm sure it's going to make a lot of sense. I'm sure it's going to clarify the situation.
Yeah, so I'll repeat the last paragraph to see where exactly we are. So the Israeli strike hit an area where a number of displaced Palestinians had been sheltering. The UN has estimated that 90% of the Strip's population of 2.1 million people have been forced to flee their homes. Ambulances arrived on the scene to collect the injured shortly after the incident. BBC Verify identified a number of the same injured Palestinians in both the footage from the scene and later images from the hospital where they were treated. One Palestinian was killed and 30 others were injured by the strike, according to the Kuwaiti Field Hospital. The footage was initially falsely linked to killings near a controversial new aid distribution site in Rafah. But BBC Verify geolocated the footage to a location in Khan Yunis, 4.5 kilometers, 2.8 miles away from the distribution site. The Hamas-run civil defense agency said, quote, Israeli gunfire had killed 31 Palestinians near the aid distribution center. The Israeli army at first said it did not fire on Palestinians near the site, but a military source later told BBC Verify that troops had fired warning shots. Okay, there is so much. Again, we're running through this, but there is so much crap here. First of all, okay, so you did report a lie, and you're saying that you reported a lie, but you don't want to say it in those words. I don't understand. I don't understand. Yeah, Alex, I'm starting to see what you're getting when you say I read a BBC article and I don't know what they're
Word
trying to say.
salad. This is word salad to me. This
Yeah.
was it's deliberately obfuscating. Again, how is it possible that from March last year the Palestinian population has grown by 100,000? I mean, it's just constantly, they just tacking on more people, tacking on, tacking on. They have no clue how many people are there. They have no idea. It's just it's kind of like, if you were to have like a cheating husband and you were to confront him and he was just to sort of totally panic and go, oh no, but I wasn't doing this, but then starts talking about something entirely different, right? It's just, what are you trying to say? Like, I wasn't there, but I was, but in a different way. But I was wearing different things and I was going a different place and I was, thinking about something else. What are you trying to say? It's just deliberately trying to kind of obfuscate, I think. Because I genuinely don't understand what they're trying to say here. So they're saying that, okay, so there wasn't a massacre, okay? That this so-called massacre occurred in Khan Yunis, right? And it wasn't actually a massacre because it was a warning shot. Okay, so they should just have a new article. Okay, BBC wants to update. Nothing happened yesterday in
So,
Gaza.
so if I try to read it as if they're genuinely trying to tell us what's going on, uh, what they are correcting is the use of the footage from this for the story that has no footage but has Hamas's word.
Right.
Is that
They gave it a footage which did not exist, which was a fake footage. They attributed and they said, "See, this is what happened," but that was footage from years ago or months ago, or a total incident of a totally other different incident.
yeah. Yeah, and again with no explanation on why they repeated. But actually, let's continue reading because it gets interesting. Because of course there was a little spat there with the White House afterwards. Um, so it continues. We used the position of the sun to ascertain that the footage was filmed in the evening shortly before sunset. A local journalist who filmed footage of the scene also told BBC Verify that the incident occurred around 7 p.m. local time on Sunday, hours after the killings near the aid site. The IDF statement did not offer a figure for those killed in the Khan Yunis blast and said that, quote, the incident is under review. The footage showing the strike has been at the heart of a dispute between the BBC and the White House. On Monday, BBC Verify reviewed the footage and debunked claims that it was connected to the killings near the distribution center in Rafah. Our debunk post was then picked up by the White House press secretary Caroline Levitt, who wrongly claimed that it showed the BBC had retracted its coverage of the aid center killings. In a statement, the BBC said her comments were, quote, misleading, adding that she had been, quote, conflating the two stories. Jesus Christ. This whole thing is conflating the two stories. It's amazing that the problem here is that Trump's press secretary had too positive a view of the BBC that she thought they're actually saying, oops, sorry, we lied, when they're not. They're saying, no, we told the truth as reported to us by Hamas. We just used footage from the wrong incident of Jews killing innocent civilians.
I also, what kind of alternative universe truly does the BBC live in? So they're trying to say that there was a massacre where 30 people were killed. Okay, so there's the smell would be unbelievable. I mean, the entire ground, it would look like it would just look like a I can't even describe what it would look like. I mean, take a look at Kibbutz Be'eri. Okay, no one's going back there anytime soon. So but they want you to believe, oh, the next day it was all kind of cleaned up and everyone was back at the aid distribution center. On what universe is that is that something that's going to be happening? And again, BBC Verify, they say at least 54,607 people have been killed in Gaza since then. Well, I mean, how do you know? Truly, how do you know? How does Hamas even know? They have no idea. They have zero clue. You think this is I mean, they're actually like, this is basically like Gaza is 5 warring family clans. Okay. It's not a place where you have civilian infrastructure. Okay, that's actually they have no clue who is emigrating, who is immigrant, who are immigrants to the area. They have no idea. But well, okay, 54,000. Yeah, why not? Let's go with that. It's the I've never seen anything like it, to tell you the truth. Really, I've never seen anything like it. And
Well, yeah.
reporting on war is difficult, right? And I think that I do have no sympathy with the BBC, but even me, when I'm trying to understand the truth about, exactly what the status is with the war in Ukraine, it's very, very difficult, okay? Because it's very, very difficult to analyze this kind of data using, open source information. It's not easy, but they're not even making the lowest level of intention,
Yeah,
right? To
reporting on a war is difficult. What's not difficult, although some reporters seem to find it difficult, is saying, I don't know. We don't have the information. What we have is people who we know
Yeah.
are untrustworthy giving us information. We're not going to use it because they have a history uh, of that. But Jonathan, ARCUK Verify, which is me skimming this article, found Hamas-led or Hamas-run 3 times in the article, but I wasn't really counting. What I didn't find is when they, let me go back to this, in what I just read, they say a local journalist who filmed footage of the scene also. What they don't mention is a local journalist is somebody who is also Hamas approved. So they didn't say a local Hamas approved journalist, which is every journalist in Gaza. Yeah.
And Israel often, it seems, as I read, gets a lot of flack because they don't include Palestinian journalists. But how many of them, Razi, as you reported on, and the channel you've reported on over the years, are journalists, but they're also, to say they're in bed with Hamas is an understatement. They're part of Hamas. They're advocates for Hamas.
That's
Journalists.
100%. 100% of journalists have to be approved by Hamas. I mean, if you see what happened to some of the protesters in recent months who basically are tired of living in tents, and so they're protesting. That's what happens if you are doing something in Hamas-controlled area, which is where most of the most of the Gaza population still live in. Um, yeah, you can't say anything that isn't Hamas approved. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
I just
please.
I was going to say I really wonder when the last time the BBC um asked a North Korean for their opinion and ran with it. You know what I'm saying? Like here you have a situation where by definition you cannot get the truth, okay? Even if you do, you would have to obfuscate their face, you would have to distort it because this is a fascist Islamic terrorist dictatorship. So by I mean you I I really don't judge somebody for not having the ability or not having the guts. Okay, it's very scary when you've got a gun to your children's heads. And that's exactly the situation that, they're in right now. Not that I feel, I don't, but let's say there is this objective, truthful journalist in Gaza. Okay, so they're going to be hung up from a tree. We don't ask the North Koreans for their opinion. Why would you ask them? Why? It doesn't make sense.
that's a good point because I think Jonathan, I don't remember exactly, but Kim Jong-un, according to North Korea, is like the world record holder in like the 100-meter sprint and the
He invented the
javelin and
hamburger.
a bunch of
Yeah.
different things. And this is not reported, as far as I know, by the BBC as fact. But yeah, Alex, that point is absolutely true. There is no difference.
Well, and the perception among, I think, my experience among younger Americans is that they read the headline and they look at the image, and what they think of is Israel as being a terrorist state or a genocide state or an illegitimate state, an illegal state, and the poor Palestinians, which have been terrorized by Israel for all of these years. I mean, I think to the effect all of this media's efforts have worked because most people are not experts in Middle East history. They don't know all of this, but their takeaway is that, boy, Israel is really unfair and immoral and unjust. Forgetting the entire context of why Israel is fighting at all in the first place and the war that was brought upon it. And how do you win a war? Why is it moral that a war should be won rather than a compromise be struck or or another cheek be turned? So it's just philosophy is all over this. It's over the coverage of it. It's over the recipients of the coverage of it. And I think it's why the war continues, is that Israel, in most people's eyes, does not have the moral high ground, despite the fact that they were attacked.
Thank you, Jeff, for the super chat. Okay, we unfortunately have time for the rest of this, so let's go through it. Um, uh, okay. Uh, oh, okay. I think the last thing I read was the BBC's statement. We did not remove any story and we stand by our journalism. The rest is just actually the BBC verifies, just general context that they put at the end, which is Israel launched a military campaign in Gaza in response to Hamas's cross-border attack, in which about 1,200 people were killed and 251 others were taken hostage. At least 54,607 people have been killed in Gaza since then, including 4,335 since Israel resumed its offensive on the 18th of March, according to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry. So, yeah,
Right.
even when they give context, of course, not calling October 7th a terrorist attack,
Invasion,
yeah,
invasion with the attempt to overthrow the government, invasion with the attempt to it was a declaration of war, right? Why are we calling it a cross-border raid? It was not a cross-border raid. It was an
They
invasion.
just to slaughter people wholesale, just
Well,
completely at whim.
I don't even think that it's particular. I think that that is even doesn't explain it enough because yes, of course there was slaughter. Yes, of course there was atrocities, but the underlying intention was to come and to displace the government of Israel. It was a declaration of war. And we need to see it like that because of course it was. This is a terror army, okay, supported by the civilians, right? Although I really don't differentiate between the two, who initiated an invasion. They planned it meticulously for years, okay? This is not just a little kind of, I mean, no terrorist attack is little, right? But it was a terrorist attack. It does not explain what happened. And imagine there was no IDF, right? This IDF, this bloodthirsty and evil and awful and terrible and whatever, okay, who the BBC also have been kind of blaming the entire kind of, time, right? They've been insinuating that it's the IDF's fault that October the 7th happened. They should have known. They should have prevented it. Well, in order to prevent it, we would have had to, probably kill people, shoot people, and then you would have, denounced us, right? So it's you can never win, right? You literally can never win here. And we have to say that this was an invasion, a declaration of war, and this is the continuation of that war to end their ability to wage war against us from a military perspective and end their governmental entity and replace it with something else.
Well, Enric said in the chat, 107 viewers, 48 likes, like the show. ARCUK Verify has tried to check with the position of the sun to ascertain when this comment was, but right now we have 105 people watching and we have 57 likes, so still more to go. Yeah, absolutely. Like the show if you like the show and share it, comment, and consider becoming a member, getting access to additional perks, and funding Hasbara, as we were called, although, of course, we are absolutely not, because we're not begging the world, the people who want Israel eliminated, to change their mind. We're just, that's not what we're here for. Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, briefly, Roz, Ayn Rand told Phil Donahue, I believe in the late 70s, why she supported Israel over the Arabs, over the rest of the Middle East. And, she talked about how Israel was bringing modernity, technology, democracy, this is my interpretation of her words, to the Middle East, whereas the Arabs were stuck in the Middle Ages. And that was 40 years ago. You have the quote, I believe. And what always strikes me is that hasn't changed. Now 40 years on, you still have an entire civilization, in this case, the Palestinians, raised to hate Jews, to want to overthrow Israel, to make war. And Israel not only defending itself, but at the same time, using that spirit of innovation and democracy and respecting of rights to create, a wealthy panacea. What was Miss Rand's words?
So I have it here. I just want to remind people that July 1st, we are doing it live in the words of Bill O'Reilly, in Boston, the Daily Objective and the reality show. Jonathan will be there, Michael Kaufman will be there, Jim Brown will be there, and I will be there on stage. Make sure you join us. There's more than just those two shows in the event. Only those two shows will be live streamed, but yeah, it's a 3-hour event. So yeah, make sure you're there. Sign up. There is a link in the live chat, and there is one in the description as well. So the question is from Ayn Rand's Ford Hall Forum talk in 1973 from the Q&A. The question is, what should the United States do about the Arab-Israeli war? This is the Yom Kippur War in 73. Her answer, give all help possible to Israel. Consider what is at stake. It is not the moral duty of any country to send men to die helping another country. The help Israel needs is technology and military weapons, and they need them desperately. Why should we help Israel? Israel is fighting not just the Arabs, but Soviet Russia, who is sending the Arabs armaments. Russia is after control of the Mediterranean and oil. Further, why are the Arabs against Israel? This is the main reason I support Israel. The Arabs are one of the least developed cultures. They are still practically nomads. Their culture is primitive, and they resent Israel because it's the sole beachhead of modern civilization, science and civilization on their continent. When you have civilized men fighting savages, you support the civilized men no matter who they are. Israel is a mixed economy inclining towards socialism, but when it comes to the power of the mind, the development of industry in that wasted desert continent versus savages who don't want to use their minds, then if one cares about the future of civilization, don't wait for the government to do something. Give whatever you can. This is the first time I've contributed to a public cause helping Israel in an emergency. I mean, the key point there is when, I'll repeat this, when you have civilized men fighting savages, you support the civilized men no matter who they are. This is very, very clear today, even to some extent, maybe more than it was in 1973. Yeah, if this is, if you're not clear about how this is a war, we are all very much a target of, even those of you who are not Jews and even those of you who are not Israel. You should be clear about it. Parting thoughts, and where can people find you, Jonathan?
Check out Can You Really Love a Dog, which was written by Dr. Peikoff. It's available at Amazon. It's all about philosophical understanding of our relationship with our pets. Can You Really Love a Dog at Amazon.
Alex, parting thoughts, and where can people find you?
I recommend it on Audible, actually. Oh wait, actually, is that one on Audible, Jonathan? I can't.
It is.
I've listened to so many of your books, to tell you the truth. That's
Thank you. Thank you.
they're all brilliant. Okay, so I would recommend to get a broad a kind of a broad variety of opinions. Take a look at the IDSF, which is Habit 20 Steam, and take a look also at the Alma Center, which is a great think tank, which is speaking about the exactly what is going on in the war. And I also really recommend the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. They've had a lot of hate recently from Tucker Carlson, and I really recommend actually listening to some of their podcasts because they're extremely well informed, and I would love to really elevate their contents.
I'm Rozzy Ginsburg on X. We're back tomorrow with the Daily Objective and the reality show. Thanks, Jonathan and Alex, for joining me. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.